I've got a great video for you today. I interviewed Ken Rohla several years ago, and I'm just now putting it out. I wasn't happy with the audio quality, but it's not that bad, and I promise you that your time is well spent watching the video in its entirety because Ken Rohla is very knowledgeable and he's very well-rounded. He gives a lot of great information in this video that you probably won't find anywhere else. I've had the pleasure of having lots of private conversations with Ken where I asked him lots of different questions on many different subjects, and he's given me a lot of great insights. So you'll definitely want to tune in and watch this video. And you know, even though I've had all those conversations with Ken, I still learned new things in this interview with him. And then now that I watched it again several years later, you know, I figured out that not only did I not know them years ago when we did this interview, but I had already forgot them and relearned them by watching this video. And it just amazes me that years have gone by and I still haven't heard anyone else mention some of these things that he mentions in this interview. And I've compiled a little list of a lot of the things that he talks about, and I put them on a page of my website so that way you can easily, you know, see a summary of the things he talked about so you don't have to worry about writing them down. And I'll link to the resources that he mentions because he mentions some really good things that you're going to want to be aware of. So I'll link to that page in the description below, and I'll also link to Ken Rohla's website and blog. That way you can follow up on his work, and you're definitely going to want to because he has some really good information out there that's cutting edge that I haven't heard from anyone else in the world. So definitely start following Ken Rohla's work, his website, and check out his YouTube channel because he's got long in-depth talks where he really gives tremendous information. This interview is really just scratching the surface of Ken Rohla's knowledge. So enjoy it and give us a big thumbs up. All right, Ken, well, welcome. Thanks for coming to do the interview.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to just go through a couple questions real quick, start off with some health stuff, personal questions that I actually personally want to ask you and get your opinion on. But before I do, let's go ahead and give a brief introduction to who you are, what you do, for those that don't know already.
Okay. Well, I'm a natural health educator from New Smyrna Beach, Florida, and my job is to teach people how to either regain or optimize their health naturally to whatever degree they're interested in. So that can be anything from improving sports performance or losing weight or feeling better, having more energy, or healing major illnesses like cancer or diabetes or autism or AIDS or any of these things we've been told are incurable. They're not incurable. And so I do that with detoxification, getting nutrients into the body, doing emotional clearing, and reprogramming of limiting unconscious beliefs. And if you do all of that, you can turn around a lot of things and have not only health but happiness to go along with it.
That sounds great. How do these people hear about you? Do they hear about you from word of mouth, the internet, or what?
Well, I advertise online. I do events. I do a lot of public speaking. I do conferences. So yeah, through various outlets that way. I do a lot of online stuff.
Yeah, I actually went to one of your potlucks a while back, and I remember meeting, I think the gentleman's name was John, and I was just kind of casually talking to him over the dinner, and he said that he had cancer and you helped him heal it. I don't remember, it was probably not John, it was probably, I forget his name.
Bob Green, maybe?
I don't remember, but it was an older gentleman. I thought that was really interesting. He was telling me about the protocol that you had him do and everything. So, pretty good, pretty impressive.
Well, I just show people a healthy way of living, and if they get rid of disease, good on them. But I don't make any claims about healing diseases. I just show people a regenerative lifestyle, and if they do that regenerative lifestyle, then all kinds of things turn around. And it just so happens that I've had a lot of people who have had serious illnesses that have lived that lifestyle and turned things around for themselves. But they do the work. I just show them how to live the lifestyle.
Definitely sound like it worked for that gentleman. Let me ask you a few questions, just small questions about health. I've been wondering this. I hear a lot of talk about, I think it's carrageenan. People are saying that it's bad and it's put in a lot of processed, like coconut milks and stuff that you buy in the store, but it's also present in Irish moss. Are you familiar with carrageenan, and do you think it's bad or good, or is it different when it's in the coconut milk as compared to naturally in the Irish moss?
Yeah, it's a different form when it's used in processed foods, of course. Carrageenan in Irish moss is in a natural state from the plant, and whereas in the forms that they put into processed food, it's been refined and it's not in a state that the body can deal with and process and recognize well. But of course, there's many constituents in food like that. So carrageenan is just one of many. That's why my focus has been on a whole organic living foods diet, not just focusing on any particular items. Of course, there's lots and lots of things to avoid in a healthy diet, and then there's also lots of foods to include. But the main thrust is to have a regenerative diet. It's to be eating uncooked foods predominantly, and when I say predominantly, I mean about 80% of your diet should be uncooked, plant-based foods mostly, if not completely, because that regenerates cells, that regenerates tissue. When you're eating cooked food, it creates acidity in the body, it alters the chemistry of foods and makes some toxins, it creates free radicals in the body, and it also creates calcification in the body, and so it leads to degeneration much more accelerated than if you're eating food straight from nature. Human beings are the only organisms on the planet that eat their food cooked, and that's why we have the kinds of health problems that we have related to diet. If we just would eat the way the rest of the world eats, then we would see far fewer problems with our health.
Definitely, I totally agree. One of the things that has really been concerning me now that I'm aging, I'm starting to see that my hair is starting to thin out, and I see that you're doing pretty good over there. I think I have more gray hairs than you, if you have any. But what are your do you have a strategy for hair? What are your thoughts on it? Is it preventable or treatable, gray and thinning hair?
Absolutely. There can be different reasons why you get gray and thinning hair. A lot of it nowadays is coming from thyroid issues, from people ingesting nuclear fallout from Fukushima and Chernobyl and other nuclear leaks around the world. And so thyroid issues are a big problem these days, which leads to baldness and loss of hair and hair thinning in men and women. So I see a lot of that. And absolutely, you can heal that. It's basically detoxifying the body and using herbs and herbal extracts to heal the glands and heal up the thyroid. And when you do that, hair thickens up, the gray hairs go away. Gray hair can also be caused, and hair thinning can also be caused by deficiencies and toxicity. So you can get analyses to find out what toxins and what deficiencies you have in your body. And once you know that, then you can supplement with food-based sources of those to bring those levels up, and then you see those kinds of problems go away.
Okay. Yeah, so that's a new thing for me, the thyroid being connected to that. I know the thyroid is also very responsive to EMFs. I know you know a lot about EMFs, so would you mind just explaining a little bit about what they are, maybe how they can harm your health and what we can do about them?
Sure. EMFs, meaning electromagnetic frequencies, they are fields and waves that are put out from electrical and electronic devices that we create in our culture, and things like the electric grid, but also wiring in homes. Cell phones are a big generator of electromagnetic frequencies and microwaves that interfere with health. Microwave ovens, wireless technologies of all kinds. They put out real strong fields like Wi-Fi that interfere with the body. One of the things that it does is interferes with cellular communication. There are very respected scientists who are showing that human cells communicate using various types of energy, of course, electrochemical impulses in the body, but also field and waves. I believe it was Gilman and Rodbell in 2004 got the Nobel Prize for figuring out that human cells communicate with each other using radio frequencies. They also communicate with sound, and they also communicate with scalar waves. And so when you're immersed in an electromagnetic field, it can interfere with that cellular communication. And if the exposure is chronic, and also the more intense and localized it is, like with a cell phone right up next to the head, it really interferes with cellular communication, and then cell functions can't occur properly, and then you get a whole cascade of health problems that result from that.
Yeah, I could definitely see how that will add up, because we're always carrying our phones on us. I mean, there's power lines everywhere, and every house it's full of electrical wires. I mean, it's unescapable. So for us that live in the 21st century, what are some of the options that we have and ways that we can reduce it, minimize the harmful effects and stuff like that?
Well, first thing is to not use your cell phone as a computer. I tell people, and they usually gasp, especially younger people, when I say you should keep cell phone use down to about 90 minutes or less per month. And most people can't even conceive of that. But if you use your phone for a phone and not as a personal computer, you can very easily do that. Using it for email, using it to surf the web. It's one thing to, do a quick surf and looking for something on the web. But when you're sitting there, spending time reading blogs and reading emails and stuff like that, that's a big, big no-no. So you can minimize your exposure to begin with. Keep the strong localized sources away from the body, and particularly away from the head. In the case of a cell phone, for cell phones, you can get what are called air tube headsets that you can use that have the microphone of the headset, which goes to a hollow tube, which then goes to an earpiece, and that keeps the antenna or the headset away from the head at least a little bit to minimize the exposure. Some people think that using a headset will reduce exposure, but it actually sends it deeper into the brain. So you can use air tube headsets. You can also use scalar wave technology, these little passive cell phone protectors. Most of them work pretty decently, and they're usually either one of two technologies, either some type of substrate like plastic or rubber, or some resin that contains quartz nanocrystals. And the quartz nanocrystals, because they're so small, their atomic size, basically, they act as antennas for scalar energy that's zipping around us all the time, and bring it into a localized area and create a scalar field that will structure the chaotic waves of the EMF from the source, particularly cell phones or Wi-Fi or whatever. And that will make the waves become what's called coherent, which just means rather than the waves bouncing around randomly, they become parallel to each other. So when they pass through the body, they make much less noise and interfere with cellular communication much less. So you can use protectors like that. They also have protectors that do the same thing in effect, but use a different technology, where you can take any material and bombard it with scalar waves and alter the nuclear structure of the atoms of the material, and then the nuclei of the atoms will become antennas for the scalar wave, just like the nanocrystals will, and do the same thing, creates a scalar field that will structure the EM waves. So, most cell phone protection nowadays works pretty well. It's pretty common technology, and it's getting inexpensive. So that's one thing you can do. It does not give you carte blanche to sit and live on your cell phone and keep it on your head all the time, or be immersed in Wi-Fi or anything else. You can put protection on your cordless phones. You can put protection on your car, on the negative battery terminal of a conventional vehicle, and on the negative battery terminals of hybrid or electric vehicles. That's very important, because electric vehicles and hybrids usually have very large DC lines, some of them passing right underneath the driver's seat, that puts off a lot of EMF. And so, you want to, honestly, I would not own a hybrid or electric car, but if you're going to own one and drive in one, I would have serious EMF protection on the electrical systems of that, and on yourself. You can get pendants and wear them. So it's really minimizing exposure, putting on protection. I also manufacture a device called a rest shield, which is a powered scalar wave generator that's much stronger than these passive devices. And you can put those in spaces like offices or in homes, and they will not only protect you against EMF, but they will also put you into deep sleep states when you go to bed at night. They will relax you, calm you down without dumbing you down or slowing you down, and basically de-stressing you. And they have a lot of other side effects like improving plant growth or improving microbe growth. So if you're fermenting foods or making beer or wine or something like that, you get improved results with that. So this scalar wave technology is a new technology that has been coming out in recent years, and there's not a lot of information out about it, but it's kind of a new paradigm in using subtle energy to structure conventional electromagnetic radiation and make it less damaging. But the real solution is to take these electromagnetic technologies that are harmful and using the field of cymatics and studying frequencies to use scalar waves and frequencies that are harmonious to living organisms so that they don't harm organisms, they can actually help organisms.
Very nice. Yeah, I can definitely see how we're going to need more of that in the future. You know, what happened to me is we went out of town, came back on vacation, there was a little slip on our door. We changed your meter. You know, I know you had already prepared and prevented that from happening, and I was one of those people. I was like, oh, it'll never happen to me, you know, and I don't know if they were just watching for us to leave or how it just coincidentally happened when we were out of town. But, yeah, so, I mean, I'm sure it's a smart meter, so since you know a lot about that as well, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about smart meters, how to go ahead and prevent it from happening if you don't already have one, and in my case, if you do have one, what you can do about it.
Okay. Well, first of all, what a smart meter is a power meter on your house or your building that has wireless technology built into it so that it can communicate with the power company. And the reason they want to do that is so that rather than sending a meter reader to your house to read your meter and also have the expense of that and the risk of that, because, you know, going onto some properties with dogs or hazards can be hazardous to these people. So, you know, it's understandable that the power companies want to reduce their expenses and have a remote controlled power meter that they can read without having to send a person there. And they can also, they've got computer technology built in it so they can analyze your power consumption. And unfortunately, it's an invasive technology also because they can analyze your power signature and see exactly what kinds of devices you're using. And in fact, there were a couple of professors at the University of North Carolina who were able to determine what people were watching on their televisions by intercepting their smart meter signals. There are a lot of privacy issues with them because, for example, somebody can, with very simple technology, watch your consumption cycles and see when you're home, when you're not at home, and then predict when you're not going to be at home and potentially rob you or break in your house or something like that. So there's a privacy issue involved with smart meters, as well as the electromagnetic radiation they put off is very, very strong. It's about equivalent to having 100 cell phones strapped to the outside of your house, which is a very high amount of electromagnetic radiation. And if you've got it right next to a bedroom or something like that, and you've got chronic exposure to it, it can create health problems. And, you know, this hasn't been studied a lot scientifically yet, but those types of exposure have been exposed. So it's known what happens when you get exposed to those strong fields. There just haven't been many specific studies done with smart meters yet. But at any rate, that's the controversy behind it. And what you can do about it is, first of all, the very first thing I would do if one of these got put on my house would be to contact the power company and have it removed and replaced with a digital non-transmitting meter, which you can do. Most of the states that I'm aware of, including Florida where we're at, you can opt out of having a smart meter. You have to contact them and ask them to do so, and you have to pay a little bit extra per month. I think here in Florida it's like $15 a month or so to have a non-wireless meter or a non-smart meter on your house. So that's the real solution, is getting it off your house to begin with, or not letting it come on in the first place, letting your power company know that you don't want a smart meter. And it just boggles my mind when I see people that complain about them who have them and they don't even bother to contact their power company and have it removed. So if you don't even take those steps, then, sorry, what do you expect? You can put EMF protection on smart meters, but quite honestly, it's got to be really strong protection. And I make devices that do that, powered scalar wave generators that do that. But again, it doesn't give you carte blanche. All it does is structure the fields that are coming off of these devices to make them less damaging, not completely non-damaging. So get rid of the thing. If for some reason you can't, for whatever reason, I can't imagine why, because every state that I know of allows you now to have these things. There's been a big enough stink raised about them that you can opt out if you press hard enough for it. But even if you don't have a smart meter, reducing the EMF from the electricity flowing through your house, flowing through the wires is important. And so that's why, my company and other companies sell these little static devices, little scalar devices that you can put on the main breaker of your power panel, and that will structure all the electricity flowing in the house, and that will reduce the fields that come off of the wires and the appliances that are plugged into it. So those are the kinds of things you can do with it, but the best thing is to just get it off your house. Now, if you're in an apartment complex or you're in a neighborhood where you've got a lot of smart meters nearby, then you're going to need some EMF protection in your house. And honestly, if I was in an apartment with a bank of smart meters, I would move somewhere, and that means probably no apartment living, honestly, these days, until this issue is resolved, which is going to take probably a lot of litigation and money and time. I would just move somewhere where there's not a smart meter in close proximity. And even so, I would have some of these EMF protection devices, like my power devices. I've got a device called a Rest Shield that will do it, and have that kind of protection in your house.
Definitely, yeah. That brings up a bunch of different ideas and topics. One thing I'm really interested in, anticipating gas and most other commodities to go up, and especially in terms of dollars. As that happens, we're going to be looking for more and more alternatives to our energy sources that we're using today. Is there something that's simple or readily available for consumers to buy that they could do or buy for their car to increase gas mileage, and they can actually test it and they can see the difference? Is there a good solution yet?
There are increasingly, you have to understand, back in the early 90s, I worked with a man named Wilhelm Reich who developed a water-fueled technology, and it could completely replace gasoline and petroleum-based fuels. Basically, Brown figured out a way to pulse electricity through water in a way that did not use more energy than what it wound up releasing. And it didn't break any laws of physics. Basically, what it did was brought energy from other dimensions of time and space into the system and converted it into usable electrical power that could then create the electrolysis to split H2O into hydrogen, oxygen gas, and then recombine them into a different form that was a gaseous phase of water, but it was not liquid water and it was not steam. It was a combustible gas that would not explode, it would implode. One of the problems that we have with power generation on this planet is it's all explosive force technology, and explosive force technologies are always polluting. You cannot have a technology that's explosive force that's not, and that's part of the byproduct of the process. Implosive force, on the other hand, is how nature creates huge amounts of energy very cleanly without all of the pollution. And so if you mimic that, you can create energy sources that are extremely powerful and very clean, and not only don't produce pollution, but can clean up the existing pollution. And so this water fuel technology, they call it Brown's gas. You can go online to YouTube or Google, and you can Google Brown's gas or HHO or hydroxy, and you can see about this stuff. And I witnessed it being utilized for various purposes and fueling things. But that technology, unfortunately, was suppressed. Brown was killed, and other people that attempted to develop it were killed because it threatens it threatens really the whole economy of the world. So, the people that have really had a shot at getting it out onto the mass market were either killed or suppressed in one way or another. And But out of the knowledge that came from that, other people have spun off technologies that are either utilizing that or doing something similar. You can see YouTube videos, for example, where people are showing how to build water fuel technologies. But there is an off-the-shelf product you can buy. It's not Brown's gas, but it will increase your gas mileage significantly. And I don't want to quote how much because, quite honestly, it'd probably get the people in trouble to tell the truth about how much mileage increase you get. But there's a website you can go to, aquatune.com. Aquatune.com. I have no affiliation with these people. I don't have any economic incentive or any other incentive to be recommending them. But they have a device for about $800 that you can put on a car or a vehicle, and it will add water into the fuel system in a way that will increase your gas mileage significantly. And there are other technologies that will be coming out. There are other technologies like that that have come out, including Brown's gas kits that you could buy, but unfortunately those companies were stopped. And so they're no longer in the market. But increasingly you're going to see free energy will come out. It's just going to have to be given away. People in the past try to make $1 billion off of it and patent it and control it and make lots of money off of it. It's never going to get out that way. It has to be given away. But aquatune.com, you can buy an off-the-shelf product that a mechanic can install on your car for about $800.
Okay. And as far as getting an alternative energy source to power a house, I mean, is it worth it to look into solar panels, or is that going to be gone here in the near future and we should be looking another direction?
Well, I think in the future, solar as it's implemented now will be very passé because it's very inefficient and it's very expensive. Solar technologies that I've seen that would be worthwhile and are inexpensive have not been allowed out on the market yet, but they will come out along with other technologies as the paradigm changes and as control over energy technologies changes. And so right now it's very viable. You know, you can buy solar and you can have a whole house. I was just talking to a man in Oregon who has a whole house, a large house running on solar and all, but you have to make a lot of sacrifices and you have to spend a lot of money on it, and it's just not it's definitely not an alternative that the whole world can use as it's currently implemented. In the future it will be, along with other technologies. But to power a house, there is a technology that's not off the shelf readily available, but it's worth looking at to see what happens with it in the future. There's a technology called Rodin coil, and there are people that are demonstrating you can take a Rodin coil, which is this special donut-shaped toroidal coil, and you can put it into a circuit and it will drop the load 95%. And so basically, if you built one large enough for a house, you could put it on the main breaker of your house and reduce your power bill by 95%. Now, I've seen that happen. And if you want to see evidence of this, you can see a small working model of it on YouTube. If you search on Daniel Nunez, N-U-N-E-Z, Global BEM, BEM as in Breakthrough Energy Movement, you can see him demonstrating this and talking about this, or you can go to his website, which is onestopenergies.com, and you can see he's got videos about how to make these coils and things. But that technology could be applied to homes, and it could reduce power consumption 95%, if not completely. So there are multiple technologies. I mean, just go online and Google free energy. You know, go on YouTube and Google free energy. You'll see all kinds of people that have alternative technologies, and many of them are legit. They're not. It's not all hoaxes. So we're heading in that direction. There have been companies all around the world also that have come out with these technologies only to be squashed. There was a Japanese company just a few years ago that came out with a water-fueled car. They were stopped. There's been companies in Europe that have come out with water fuel. There was a company, I believe, in France that came out with a compressed air engine, and they were stopped. So eventually, you know, people with the power and the money to make this come out are going to allow it to come out. The paradigm is changing right now. There's an alliance of nations called the BRICS Alliance, B-R-I-C-S, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. There's about 140 countries in this alliance now, and they are making moves to create an alternative world economy utilizing some of these technologies and basically creating a sustainable world as opposed to the controlled economy that we have now, or at least the paradigm of the controlled economy we have now. So as I think all of that progresses, you're going to see these other countries standing behind and promoting these alternative technologies, and we will see a change.
Looking forward to that day. You know, Ken, what I really like about you and your work is that you're very well-rounded. You know, you're not just focusing on getting people to eat salads as much as they need to. You know, it's much bigger than that. You know, you're into the energy, you're into a lot of different aspects of health. It's not just diet, such as the EMFs as we spoke about. I went to one of your seminars and I really liked it. You were just giving a lot of cutting-edge information, and one of the things that really interested me, that I think that just really cutting edge, I'd like to hear you kind of explain it. You gave us a tip to put the minerals, concentrated minerals, in our kombucha so that the fermentation would increase the quality of the minerals. Could you explain that process a little bit and how we could...
Sure. Well, first of all, you have to understand that fermentation and photosynthesis are very amazing properties. They're quantum properties. They're interdimensional or multidimensional processes in fermentation and photosynthesis. You've got the creation of superconducting monoatomic minerals in photosynthesis and fermentation, that these superconductors actually act as lenses or antennas for scalar energy that is multidimensional. It exists through multiple dimensions or frequencies of time and space. So these processes are bringing energy into the system that is coming from other dimensions of space-time and imparting very special healing frequencies and chemistry and all sorts of things, having a very interesting influence. Fermentation is kind of nature's nanotechnology. You take microbes of whatever kinds and they will eat some type of food and break it down into nutrients that are much more bioavailable. And there are certain types of microbes that can take toxins and break them down into non-toxic elements and literally create alchemy. And this is being proven. This is not, just me talking. One of the things in my talks and events that I do is show the scientific evidence of this. There is a professor, for example, in the UK named Lynn McCaskey, who is taking microbes and having them eat nuclear materials and break them down into non-nuclear elements and getting rid of radioactivity. So, this isn't like some crazy new age nonsense. This is hard science that cutting edge researchers are doing. So with fermented foods, not just kombucha, but any kind of fermented food, whether you're making kraut or kefirs or yogurts or kombucha, which, by the way, for people that aren't familiar with kombucha, it's basically a fermented drink that's very high in beneficial probiotic bacteria. And people who drink it, it improves health. There have even been some people who've reported healing major diseases like cancer by drinking kombucha. Homemade kombucha, not necessarily the stuff you buy in the stores, because those usually have a lot of sugars and things in them. But basically, when you feed these microbes nutrients, they can break them down and make them more bioavailable. So in the case of any of these fermented foods that you want to make, you can add minerals to them, and the microbes will eat the minerals, break them down into bioavailable forms, which your body will then uptake, and that will accelerate healing and proper function in the body. And so, for example, specifically, you can take liquid sea minerals. There are various brands on the market. There's one called Concentrace, for example, that you can add a little bit of that to a kraut or a kimchi or kombucha or whatever, and that will radically jack up the nutrient levels and the mineral levels in the foods, which will make them that much more healthy and fortified without any unnatural, weird chemical fortification that you typically see in processed foods. So it's just a really simple and inexpensive way to have really nutrient-dense food with high minerals. And mineral loss over time is really a major part of what causes disease and aging in people. And the older you get, the more you'll see this. Bone density loss, and that kind of stuff. Minerals create all of the physical structures in the body. tissue firmness and all that. So when you get older and you start seeing sags and bags and lowered bone density and that kind of stuff, that's mineral loss. And you can reverse that by taking in these bioavailable minerals, by supplementing this way.
A lot of the high-end supplements, mineral supplements and stuff like that, aren't they using this fermentation process as a technology to create high-end products?
If they're high-quality companies, yeah, a lot of them are using fermentation, and you can take fermentation to a whole different levels. There's, for example, a company called Quanta Foods that is run by a brilliant man named Paul Yannick, and Dr. Paul Yannick. And Paul Yannick will do multi-stage ferments in magnetic fields and scalar fields. And when you do a fermentation for example, if you're making kombucha or some kind of a liquid, if you do it inside of magnetic fields, that will not only create the bioavailable minerals, which are known as angstrom minerals, that have just a few atoms bundled together that are small enough particle sizes that can get into and feed the cells. But it will also create monoatomic minerals, which means minerals that are composed of individual atoms of that element. And in that state, they're superconducting, they're extremely healing and regenerative to the body. So there are companies like Quanta Foods that will take a ferment and put it in a scalar field and in a magnetic field with a certain culture and certain foods, and have it digest the foods to create the bioavailable nutrients. And then when that process is done, add in another culture and a whole other set of foods or nutrients, and let that break down and create the monoatomic elements and all the angstrom elements and all the very sophisticated chemistry that you can only get through food. And they'll do that over and over again. And in case of Quanta Foods, some of their products take 6 years to make because they do these multi-stage ferments. Wow. So you can get very sophisticated with this stuff. But in the end, what you wind up with is an incredible superfood that's extremely nutrient dense and extremely regenerative. And you can do it yourself at your house. You know, you can do these simple things yourself.
Definitely. Yeah, that's exciting. It's just really exciting to see where the cutting edge of health is and the direction where it's all going. And like you said, what's awesome is you can do that at home. You can just put a little bit of concentrates minerals into your kombucha, put a little bit of Scalar Energy devices near the kombucha while it's brewing, and essentially you've got the same little setup.
Exactly. You can also vortex water in magnetic fields and create the same angstrom and monoatomic minerals. There's a device called a water vitalizer on the market. It's about a $500 product, but it basically looks like a blender, and you fill it up with water, and it has a mineral block in it, and it vortexes anywhere from 9 minutes to 27 minutes. And because of the vortexing is a very, very special quantum process also. You're taking a very large volume and bringing it down to an infinitely small volume in that vortex. And so you get all of this weird physics going on. That's why you see weird things with like tornadoes. Scientists have discovered, for example, when you see after effects of tornadoes, sometimes you'll see like a blade of grass shoved through a telephone pole, or something very small and light and fragile being shoved through something very big and heavy and dense. Well, what's happening is they've discovered it's not being pushed through the material. What's happening is in a strong vortex like a tornado, you actually open up a singularity. You create a black hole in the vortex, and that changes matter. It alters matter, and it becomes less physical. And so what happens is you can have these occurrences where matter will become less dense and almost non-physical. And so when these particles are flying around in the vortex of a tornado, when it slows down and rematerializes, they'll rematerialize, mixed in with each other. And so if you take that concept in a water vortex, you can do the same kinds of things, and you can take these inorganic minerals and break them down and make them into angstrom and monoatomic minerals, and then they become extremely regenerative and healing to the body. And I'm going to be coming out with a little kit for like $100 that you can strap onto a blender and do the exact same thing for far less money, that creates scalar fields and magnetic fields at the same time. And you just spin the water around in your blender for 10 minutes, and you can feed it to plants, you can feed it to microbes, you can drink it, and you can see the effects. When I take these waters and feed them to, for example, water cultures like water kefir, normally the grains of water kefir are about the size of maybe a pea. And when you feed it this water, they will be 5 times that size, and they'll grow 5 times faster. So instead of taking 10 days to make a ferment, you can do it in 3 or 4. So these are the really sophisticated things that are very simple to do, that anybody can do, that I teach, is, how to do these things really simply, really inexpensively, to maintain health amidst a world of genetically modified food and geoengineering pollutants and nuclear fallout and all these other things that we've got going on. You can still maintain superb health through all of that if you know these simple things.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, that's really powerful, is when you can learn simple things that you can actually apply to your life, and then you're not dependent upon a doctor or expensive supplements and products and stuff like that. Learning from people like yourself is just so empowering for everyone, because we can take those pieces and bring them into our lives and start making changes, and that's what we need. The thing about scalar energy, it's really, really intriguing. Is there such a way to scientifically measure it? Is there any way of doing it anecdotally, or is there like a technology where people can see it, or
it's not easy to do, and if you want to learn about detecting and measuring it, you need to study the work of a Russian physicist named Nikolai Kozyrev. That's Kozyerev. Nikolai Kozyrev. Kozyrev is he's dead now, but he was probably the most cutting-edge researcher of scalar energy, and he did figure out ways to detect it and measure it. It's not easy because the energy is so high frequency and it's so subtle that it's kind of like brain waves. They exist and they do alter and create matter and such things, but we don't have devices that can measure them very well, because this type of energy is not normal electromagnetic energy. Normal electromagnetic energy flows in these spirals too. We've been taught that energy flows in these up and down waves, but in truth it flows in these spirals. It's just when we measure it, we're seeing the cross section, say on an oscilloscope or something, we see the cross section and we think it's just an up and down motion. Or like at the beach, you see waves going up and down. Well, it's because you've got a liquid that's nailed down to the surface of the earth with gravity. But if that water was allowed to float freely, it would be spiraling. Because everything in the cosmos spirals. All the systems in the universe are spiraling. And so, to measure these things, it's not really simple, but you can use simple methods to detect them. And including human consciousness, because consciousness itself is a form of scalar energy. So I would study the work of Kozyrev and also David Wilcock on Gaiam TV. That's GAIAMTV.com. David Wilcock has a series called Wisdom Teachings, and he talks a lot about Kozyrev's work and explains it in layman's terms to understand it. But there are ways to measure and detect it, particularly detecting it, that you can do, and also you can utilize it in really simple ways. For example, Kozyrev figured out that you can create mirrors made out of aluminum and surround living organisms with them, and it will heal disease and enhance the health of the organism. So, for example, you can buy some sheet aluminum and put it around yourself in a parabolic curve and sleep in it or stay in it for periods of time and improve your health with it. And in fact, people have healed diseases like cancer by doing that. So this technology, the physics behind it is very sophisticated, but the measuring and the utilizing of it, it can be very simple. Detecting of it can be very simple. That's what I do and teach in my classes and workshops, and everything I do is who these people are and how you find them and how you can study them and learn these things yourself to whatever degree you're interested in. But increasingly, people are developing applications for scalar energy, and scalar energy has gone by many other names throughout history. Some people call it chi or prana, or life force, or tachyon energy, all these different names. It's really the same thing. It's the energy of consciousness is what it really is. It's faster than light energy of consciousness. And so it's a very exciting realm to work with.
Yeah, exactly like you were saying, you can actually mess with this stuff at home, and like you were saying with the I forget what it was, but it was growing faster and stuff like that. And there's a lot of people that report online, they're using it in the gardens, and then showing the difference between plants without a scalar energy device and plants with, and that's been cool to check out online too, and something that anyone can try, in their own backyard. So yeah, I mean, it's an excellent technology. What you're talking about with the mirrors, that kind of reminds me of Wilhelm Reich. Is that
Wilhelm Reich?
I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his name, but yeah, is it similar?
Well, Reich didn't use mirrors per se, but he used the physics of it was the same. Reich was a man who lived back in the early 1900s and developed a lot of different things, but one of the things he developed was a technology for weather modification and balancing the weather, actually, from the pollution, all the man-made influences that throw our weather off. And basically he just took a bunch of large pipes and connected them to tubes that would ground into water and point them up the sky, and it would ground what he had a whole language for it that I don't like to use because it's almost magical, but basically he would ground these frequencies of energy into the ground that were disharmonious to living organisms, and it would ionize the atmosphere, and then it would bring rain to an area that was under drought, or if it was an area that was flooding, it would stop the rain. Basically it would balance the weather by changing the ionization of the atmosphere. So Reich's technology used maybe similar principles of what Kozyrev was, but he used it in a different application.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize that about what Reich was doing. That seems really interesting and way ahead of his time as well.
He was way ahead of his time, and he wound up getting jailed for it, and he died in prison. Had all of his technology taken away from him, and then the U.S. military wound up using it. And they're using it today. These HAARP antennas, for example, that are now being decommissioned because they've developed other scalar technologies that are less obvious. You can Google HAARP, H-A-A-R-P, and there are books written about this. There's one called Angels Don't Play This HAARP, and you can see information about them. But they took his technology and Tesla's and other people's,
right,
and are using it for weather modification and creating earthquakes and warfare and all kinds of stuff. And if that sounds like a big conspiracy theory, you can go online and search on, just Google owning the weather by 2025, and you'll come across a PDF file you can download from the Air Force's own website. It's a public document, and it's like 57 pages explaining how they want to control the weather by 2025 for military operations and various purposes. There are other reasons as well. There's some really good documentary films about weather modification and what's going on with it now. On YouTube, you can see it for free. What in the world are they spraying, and why in the world are they spraying? And of course, I write a lot about it and expose a lot of information about it. I've got a blog, which is freshandaliveblog.com, where I discuss the details of this stuff. And then also I've got a resources page on my main website, freshandalive.com. If you go to the resources page there, I've got a radiation links page that has tons and tons of scientific information about all these various topics, showing that it's not all conspiracy theory. There are scientists having conventions and conferences about this stuff. There are patents involving this stuff. It's very easy to confirm if you have half a brain and use Google.
Right. Yeah, it's incredible we have access to all that information. Is there anything else that you would like to add or say before we wrap it up?
Well, the main thing is for people to understand, first of all, that consciousness truly creates reality. It's not some metaphysical conceit. Consciousness creates reality. There are scientists showing how that happens. The brain is a scalar wave generator, and the nervous system is the antenna for it. So your brain and your body put out these scalar waves and fields that go out into the quantum field, and if they have enough duration and intensity, they slow down and coagulate into matter. And that's how we all create our reality. So when you understand that, you have immense power as a human being to create the life that you want and have the life that you want. But you've got to unplug from the control paradigm that is putting out information that's very limiting to human consciousness, that, through the mainstream media and movies and press and things like that, that make people think that things are hopeless, and, that all of the pollution, all the problems that we have on this planet are just spiraling uncontrolled. we have solutions for all of this stuff already. And it's up to us to find them and utilize them and just bypass the so-called authorities and don't give them authority over your life and create an uplifting life for yourself. And when you understand that you create your reality, excuse me, then you can simply seek out the answers, and you will find them, especially in this day and age of YouTube and Google. You can find anything if you just know to ask the question. Mm-hmm. I think I breathe in a bug. No, I'll tell you what.
It's B12.
Yeah, really.
Oh, speaking of which.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Good old vitamin B12.
Thought you were vegan.
Alrighty.
So I know you're busy, and you said that you had a few things that you've been working on for a while. Is there anything that you can disclose, or
Yeah, some of the stuff I work on I can't talk about publicly, unfortunately, but because I've had death threats when I have spoken publicly about some of the solutions I've got. But the thing is, I can talk about. My focus has been over the last few years showing people how they can protect themselves against nuclear fallout that's coming down from Fukushima, from Chernobyl, and all the other leakages around the world. So that's been a major focus, how to get it out of your bodies, how to keep it out of your body and prevent it from even getting there in the first place. And then also, how to not only avoid genetically modified foods, but also how to revert GMO DNA of plants and in your own body. You can. One of the side effects of these monoatomic minerals, also known as ORMUS minerals, is that you can feed plants and ferments these minerals and create these monoatomics, and when you ingest them, they will neutralize radioactivity in the body. They will transmute toxic elements in the body, and they can also reverse damage from GMOs. If you feed them to plants or GMO animals, then you can revert their DNA back to the original heirlooms. And this is being done increasingly. Unfortunately, there are some plant foods that you can buy that will do this, but the companies don't advertise it because they've been attacked. But if you understand, you can do this yourself with ferments. You can make you can take rock powders, for example, and ferment them with this microbe mixture called effective microorganisms, and you can make your own plant foods that are high in ORMUS that you can feed to plants, and you can take GMOs or hybrid plants and revert them back to the original heirlooms in one generation. One big secret that Monsanto and all the gene giants don't want people to know is that GMO DNA will revert back to its original anyway over several generations. There was a study done with fruit flies where they showed after 7 generations, these fruit flies that had been genetically modified to have no eyes wound up getting their eyes back after 7 generations. That's a big secret Monsanto doesn't want people to know about.
Because the flies or the seeds are getting their information from the source field anyway, and not necessarily
exactly. The DNA is not the genetic blueprint. The DNA is a superconducting antenna that is the carrier of the genetic blueprint, but the actual blueprint is in consciousness itself. And consciousness is composed of these scalar waves that is the fabric of all matter and energy that we exist in. And so when you understand that, and this is not just me saying this, there was a Russian physicist named Alexander Golod, and you can go Google this. His last name is spelled Golod. You can see on YouTube he built a 144-foot tall pyramid outside of Moscow. He's a high-level, very highly credentialed scientist working for the Russian military, and supposedly, he was commissioned by the military to study pyramids for warfare. But being the good person that he is, he studied them for benevolent purposes and found all these amazing healing properties of pyramids, and also that they would neutralize radioactivity in the atmosphere and in groundwater and all kinds of amazing things. But the most promising thing that he discovered was outside of his big pyramid growing outside of Moscow, they got all these large fields, and they discovered these flowers that were growing out in the fields that no one had ever seen before. So they called in a botanist to identify them and discovered that the flowers had been extinct on Earth for 11 million years. And so what Golod theorized was that the pyramid it acted like an antenna for the scalar energy patterns of these flowers to come from the quantum field, or whatever you want to call it. Some people might call it the Akashic Records, but from somewhere out there in non-physical reality, and they brought in the energetic pattern into physical form. And Wilhelm Reich also made those kinds of discoveries as well. If you study Wilhelm Reich, R-E-I-C-H, and his work with what he called bions, same thing, where he would take vacuum tubes with sand in it and heat it up to glowing hot temperatures, where it would sterilize everything inside the vacuum tube. It was completely sealed. And then he would study it under a very strong microscope, and over time see that life forms would start growing inside of a sealed container that had been sterilized. So when you start seeing those kinds of things, you realize that all of this nonsense that we've been taught about the way life has started from some primordial soup and it evolved, from some slime in the ocean, it's absolute nonsense. Yes, things do evolve, but the whole paradigm we've been taught has been taught to us by design, it didn't just evolve that way, to keep us in very limited understanding of our reality so that we can be harvested basically for our energy and through the monetary system. So if you break out of that paradigm, you start learning about these things, you can empower yourself and have a much more enjoyable life. It's much more fun to be in control of your destiny. So those are the kinds of things I teach, and that's what I've been focusing on. Is very simple, inexpensive ways of doing all of this stuff, and it's very fun and it's very uplifting when you live this way.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things that I really like to emphasize with my message is that at the same time that we have all these problems, we've got the Fukushima disaster, we've got GMOs wanting to take over, but what I like about your message is you're providing solutions to these world problems. And it looks like, once the powers that be, for whatever reason, end up having to step down, a lot of these technologies are going to come forward. We're going to start cleaning up the oceans. We're going to start remineralizing the soil, getting back to heirloom seeds and so on and so forth, hopefully re-permaculturing the earth, So, there's a lot of hope, but we're in the middle of this time in history where we've got more problems than ever before, but we've got solutions for them, and it feels like we're teeter-tottering that tipping point, right?
Exactly. I've seen the technologies that could solve all of these physical problems we have on the planet, from pollution to energy production. Buell Brown's water fuel technology could neutralize radioactivity simply by using it to burn radioactive materials. The flame that came off of a Brown's gas torch had really weird quantum properties, and it would interact at the atomic level with materials. And so you could take different materials and mix them with radioactive elements and burn them together, and they would transmute into a non-toxic, non-radioactive element. And that's just one technology of many. As a matter of fact, if you go to my website on that resources page, I have a shortcut link to it. It's radiationlinks.freshandalive.com. You can see I've got 61 patents there worldwide posted for methods for neutralizing radioactivity. 8 of them in Japan. So it's not like we don't have the solutions. We've had the solutions for many, many decades. They just have not been allowed to come out. But increasingly, the powers that be are becoming the powers that were, and their control is slipping. And increasingly, the information on how to do all this stuff is coming out. And you're going to see out of necessity, in order for us to survive as a species, these are going to have to come out. And that's exactly what's happening. I just saw an article about the Rockefeller family who were founders of the oil industry, and now they are divesting themselves of oil completely. So they can see the writing on the wall. They know what's coming.
Very interesting. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we...
Just, for people to truly understand and get, and if you don't get it, go study and learn and find out. Consciousness creates reality, and you are in charge of your destiny, and all of the solutions that we have are available now. You just have to go find them and pull them into your life and create them for yourself. And if you do that, then you know, nobody can control you, and you'll have a wonderful time.
Thanks a lot for coming out, Ken.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.